Welcome back to another Artist Spotlight. I'm President of Harmony, Joe Foy, and today I am joined by Craig Thornton. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I want to just start and, you're a man of kind of many talents, both in writing. Have you performed as well?
No, I don't perform. I do direct though.
You do direct.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You've done direction and you've done, and you've written quite a few things. I want to, before we get into those things, kind of go a little bit into your background. Did you grow up around here?
Yeah, so I grew up in Theresa.
Okay.
And then I graduated from Indian River. Then I went to 2 years to JCC, and then I got into, surprisingly, I got into NYU Film School. So I went to film school in New York, NYU. And then I went to graduate school at the American Films Institute in Los Angeles.
Awesome.
So my first, I studied screenwriting a lot. And then later in life, after I moved back to the area, I went to graduate school and finished getting an MFA in playwriting. So, but I grew up in the area, and like I said, I kind of fell in love with film. I had a teacher at JCC that was was there only for 1 year and needed a film appreciation class. And that's how I kind of fell in love with film. And I really didn't think I'd get into NYU Film School, but I wrote this essay about a movie that I watched while at JCC, and that's how I got in. So, and I've been studying film and writing scripts and writing plays ever since.
Great. Do you know how many, well, I guess there's probably a number that you've written and also a number that have been produced. Do you have an idea of either of those numbers, or a vague idea?
Well, full-length plays are a lot harder to get produced, so I've written maybe 8 full-length plays and probably 6 short plays. But I've also written 5 full-length screenplays. And I just wrote my first television pilot.
Really?
Yeah, so that's something that genre is all new to me. So when I lived in Los Angeles, I had an agent. I was trying to be a screenwriter, or was a screenwriter, and my dad got sick. I really hated LA, hated the West Coast, so I moved back home. And when I moved to the East Coast, I sort of shift my focus back to playwriting. But I've had plays done in New York, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Maine, Wisconsin. I still have a couple full lengths that haven't been produced yet. The last thing that was kind of a major thing is I had a reading of my play, The High Cost of Heating, down at Syracuse Stage. So that was the first LORT of that. LORT is a regional theater that's professional, that uses equity actors. And that play was the Yale Drama Series runner-up prize. So that play has been read in, The High Cost of Heating has been read in Syracuse, Watertown, Los Angeles, a bunch of places, but it still hasn't been produced. But yeah, so.
Awesome. So quite a few things. Are you able to expand more on the pilot that you've worked on for the TV series?
Sure. So this is an interesting journey. I taught screenwriting at I was teaching screenwriting at Syracuse University, and we were on lockdown. And I had been trained. I had never written a TV pilot before. I'd only written full-length screenplays. But as a result of working at Syracuse, I was told you have to write, teach pilot writing. I'm like, okay, well, so then I studied it. And then I just started binge watching everything. And what happened was I had a project when I was really young, when I lived in LA in the 90s, that was a screenplay. And it had been optioned, but I could never figure out the ending. And so I during the pandemic, I was like everybody else at home, cleaning and running, finding stuff. So I found literally 300 pages of notes for this screenplay that never had an ending. I thought, well, what if it was a TV show? I wouldn't have to have an ending. So yeah, so then I wrote it as a TV pilot, and I've been entering it in a lot of contests. It's done really well. Just got accepted into the Berlin International Film Festival.
Awesome.
So I had a cold reading here in town with just some actors that I know to hear how it read, kind of a private reading. And it takes place in a small town in Wisconsin, and it's called Warrenville. And it's sort of, it's about a psychologist who was once really famous and renowned, who's kind of damaged as a result of losing one of her clients. And she doesn't ever want to practice psychology again, but she's forced to when she ends up being arrested in this small town. And the town is really weird. It has a lot to do with generational trauma. and just the healing of the town and the guilt of the town. So I have the first episode, and then I have an outline for the first season.
Awesome. And I guess going along those lines, kind of, how do you got a lot of inspiration from binge watching,
Yeah.
I assume. Is that similar for plays and other things? Like, how do you get inspiration?
It just varies. It varies a lot depending on the project. That project originally generated from reading this book called Wisconsin Death Trip, which I actually got out at the Flower Memorial Library. So that's an interesting genesis. So
go to your library and make sure.
Yeah. So and that book was this really cool document book about all this weird stuff that happened in this town in Wisconsin in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, what if that was modernized? So that's how the whole deal came out. But the format, came from binging. It just depends. Lots of times it is from watching other things. I usually get a sense of character first. That's kind of where I work my way in. When I was younger, I was really influenced by certain playwrights. But as I've gotten older, you just can get inspiration anywhere, really.
Yeah, that's great. And so, in terms of local kind of productions of your plays, who has done those?
Well, I love working locally and regionally. So, the most renowned production is In My Shoes, which we did at Indian River Theater Performing Arts. And that's the play docudrama about high school students who parents were deployed in a combat zone, military kids. And that project came out of interviewing students interviewing other students about how they felt when their parents were deployed and the experience of being a military child, not knowing what's going to happen to your parent, the estrangement that happens, and all their experience. So that was kind of a really cool project, and that generated right here. It would never have happened if I weren't in the area.
Mm-hmm.
That was not my original idea. It was sort of like came in there and tried to figure out how to make it work. That's been done in Wisconsin, Syracuse, a bunch of places. So that project is definitely something that was completely locally generated, and it was featured in an article in the CNN about how communities and military bases interact and help each other. So basically, it was also done as a study with the national. I think Congress did this study about the effects of deployment, and it was used. Theater was used as a therapeutic tool, and they referenced that. So that project, which was quite a while ago, like 14, 15 years ago, that took up a lot of time in my life, and it was great, and it was really rewarding.
Yeah.
And then I've done. I had I self-produced a full-length play at the Lake Ontario Playhouse, where it used to where the ballroom is now. That used to be a little theater.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've self-produced a play there that subsequently was done at Indian River as well. That was called The Sweet Life.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Did you also do that recently, or am I?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So recently we did a Zoom reading of that.
Oh, okay.
So during the pandemic, when nobody could go to theater, we did a Zoom reading of that.
Gotcha.
The Little Theater produced that. Yeah. And that's also was sort of generated from living upstate. A lot of my themes, not particularly the pilot, are New York, upstate New York based, or they're kind of like I like to call it like regional theater.
Mm-hmm.
So
basically, you've gone into writing and directing, but you don't do much of the acting portion. You said, right?
No, I'm a really good director, but I'm not a very good actor.
Now, I was going to ask, how do you, as a director, writer, how do you find making that connection between what you have to get the actors to do and,
Well, when you are doing an original production, when you're doing an original play that's never been done before, which when I direct my own plays, that's usually the case, that is part of the process. It's like, I guess for a musician, it's like the recording session. So, actors still have a lot of input in that. Like, this line doesn't work, or, like, this doesn't make any sense, or, I think this character would never say that. So I really use that as a kind of like a rewrite process, right? So yeah, I mean, I love working with that. The thing about writing, it's very lonely, and it's a very isolated experience. So until you bring actors in, you don't really know if anything works. You'll never know if anything works unless you have a reading of it in front of an audience. So actors are really important to that process, and you know, you can, like I said, you really can discuss character development with actors. If they don't understand why a character is doing this, you explain it, and then if they say, well, it's not on the page, then you have to make sure it's on the page. So I that's one of the reasons. I mean, I've directed other stuff that I haven't written, of course, but I really love directing theater. It's one of my passions, and I wish I could do it more often.
Now, is it nerve wracking for you to maybe like, especially like near the beginning when you were first like workshopping something? Is that process nerve wracking, or did you find, because you know, you're basically giving a piece of yourself, which is your writing, to.
It was in the beginning. I'm used to it now, though.
Yeah.
I'm used to it now. I think the key is that you know, you got to present something that is mostly done, and you know, and has a thematic core, and what you're trying to communicate is clear. But you know, I've had like The Sweet Life was a big disaster. The reading wasn't a big disaster. The first act was great, and I had a woman come up to me, and I still know this woman. She lives in Sackett's, and she comes up to me and says, "I love that play, first act. You know, I just want the family to stay together." And I'm like, okay, well, that's not what happens. You know, and right before the play went up, I had a friend in California read it and literally leave a voice message saying, this ending like doesn't work. Like, you got this like dark ending for this play that doesn't have it. And I was really opposed to like the happy ending, but it didn't, you know, so that was like, okay, like everyone's going to be annoyed with me because they don't have the ending they want, but it really helped. So it's an invaluable process. Because what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't think I would have ever caught that myself unless I had it in front of an audience. Yeah, I completely changed it and it worked much better.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. But you also have to, like, you have to kind of develop an instinct for what's a good note and what's a bad note, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you get a note from 50 people that you respect and like, it's probably a good one, but.
Yeah, no, I tried to rewrite it at the 11th hour. We had a reading of it, and there were 85 people to reading, and I tried to write the ending like in an hour, 2 hours, and I literally came in with like 8 or 9 different new pages with the actors and threw it at them. They were not happy with me. I mean, they were reading, so it wasn't like they had memorized it, but they were like, we can't, you know, because I realized that note was good, and then it got reinforced.
Yeah.
So I never, you know, and same thing with my reading that I had of the TV pilot recently. I had, you know, 2 guys that I know that I really respect who gave me the same note, and it really helped me. You know, but then you get notes that like it's somebody else writing it. You know, this is not the story that I wanted to write.
Right.
You know,
it's just something that they wanted.
Right, or they see it this way, and you have to be careful. But yeah, when you're young, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to have confidence, and I mean, I don't ever get it. I don't like. I got a thick skin now, so I like getting notes because, you know, 80% of them are probably not going to work.
Right.
But you just need one good one, you know.
Yep. And now you're also, and you'll have to tell me if this is the first time or not, but you're also delving into musical world in terms of your writing as well. Is this the first time that you've done that? Okay. So
I took an incredibly interesting. And I wish I could remember that teacher's last name. First name is John. So I took a lyric writing class during the pandemic through the Dramatists Guild, which is my sort of union for playwrights. And the teacher teaches at the MFA musical theater program in NYU, which is the only, I think, school that has an MFA in musical theater. And I loved it. And I've been wanting to delve into lyrics, but I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I kind of didn't like musical theater when I was young. I don't know what the problem was, but now, you know, I love musical theater, and I think it's one of the most creative art forms there is. So I was like, well, I can't write music. What the heck am I going to do, right? So out of the blue, a composer that I know, Augusta Ciccione Bates, who is 91 years old, she probably is going to be knowing that brought up her age, but she's a brilliant composer. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize a while back. Out of the blue, I get this email from her saying, hey, I want to write some music will you write a little play to go with it? And I said, well, I will do it, but only if I can write lyrics. I didn't want to play with music. I wanted to write lyrics because I thought this would be a really good opportunity for me to experiment with that. And, and I'm still rusty. Like, I don't know how to deal, I really wanted to, it takes place in the 1920s. It's about prohibition and bootlegging in Cape Vincent. So I was really into using the language of that period, right? But at the same time, like, I didn't understand repetition and a lot of things like that. I mean, I understood the, ABB format or whatever that was because I'd taken that class. But I'm curious to see how it's going to work, putting it together. And then another problem I had is I got so excited about writing the lyrics and dealing with her as a composer, she's great, that I forgot, oh yeah, I still have to tell a story. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? That's what I would normally do. But the great thing about musical theater is one of the experiments that I did in the class was I took the opening of my play, The Sweet Life, and I wrote it as lyrics. So I was able to advance the story and how do I say it, in one song that took 11 pages of dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I think the key is like, what can you tell in dialogue and what can you tell in, music?
Yeah. And that's music theater is definitely like, there's a lot of moving parts to it to figure out like what works in the song and what doesn't. And there's also the parts of like in between the lyrics parts. I don't know if you did much of that, but.
Well, what I did this time is I was kind of scrambling for a format. So I created it as a vaudeville show. So the vaudeville was sort of on that way outs in the early 20s, but it was still around. It kind of died, definitely was dead by the end of the decade because of silent movies. But so I created a vaudeville of like bootlegging. So it's called the whole show is called Picking Elderberries because when bootleggers were caught in the swamps in Cape Vincent in the 1920s, the cops were like, or the feds, whatever they're called, said, what are you doing? They're like, we're picking elderberries. So the format that I chose was sort of this vaudeville type thing, which helped me connect the songs, as well.
Yeah. And that the experience working with a composer, were you together a lot, or was more like you sending the lyrics and then getting something back?
Yeah, we didn't work together that much. I mean, and again, I think it was partly because the format was kind of like a little skits, and it was my first time. And it's only one act, but I don't think I would ever do that again. I think I would probably, if I was doing it full length, I'd probably want to work with a composer more often.
Yeah.
Just because it did sort of like, it just doesn't work as well, because like these are lyrics that don't work, and I'm like, well, why not? If you're in the room with somebody and you read the lyrics, you can tell right away if it doesn't work with music,
Yeah, you can have a little more back and forth and the discussion.
But it still was a great experience, and I'm looking forward. We're going to workshop it hopefully soon. Yeah. And I have an idea for a full-length musical that I wanted to write for so long that was originally a play, and then it just became more and more fantastical and like more and more like magical realism. And I thought, I'm not so much into realism anyway with my plays. I'm kind of not.
Yeah.
I mean, television is different. That's a realism format, but theater's not real. Mm-hmm. I have the whole idea for that going, and but I just don't know when that's going to happen. So
yeah, so kind of great things to come.
Yeah, I've got a lot of projects right now, and I'm in a really creative phase, which I'm really happy about. I don't know. I only have one job now, and so I'm pretty focused, and I am really grateful. A lot of friends that I went to college with, aren't writing anymore, and it's a really tough business.
Yeah,
it's a really, really tough business.
For sure. So, along those lines, so you're able to find time to write. Obviously, it's not a full-time thing that you're doing. Your full-time job is.
Right, I work in media. I work at WWNY. I have to have a full-time job. But I'm able to do things there that I like. It's not. I would like to not have a job and just write constantly. But one of the things I really, really try to do at my day job is I'm the arts and entertainment editor. They didn't have any. This area actually, all areas have artists in them, and this area was really underrepresented with arts. and I'm glad we have agency, organizations like yours, and so I developed the Arts All-Star program, because when I was a kid growing up here, I told my guidance counselor teacher I wanted to be a writer, and he looked like I had three heads,
Yep.
So, before I started that program, we had the academic all-star, and then, of course, all smart kids get recognition, and then the athletes. All the athletes were getting recognition. I'm like, what about the artists, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to do as much as possible to help support the arts through that, in that position, working with nonprofits as well, getting advertising. And I started my own list with Craig's To Do list. So, a lot of the stuff I do is not so much fun, but I guess one of the reasons, my point was I knew I had to have a day job, and my point was I want to do something. If I want my day job to be a little bit more meaningful than just a regular day job, so that I can balance it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And
I didn't realize that you had created the Arts All-Star, but that's a big thing.
Well, yeah, actually, we created that through the original. Carrie Robertson came up with that idea with me, and when we were at the Laura Oates was instrumental in that. When we first were at the North Country Arts Council, we used to do that.
Oh, okay.
We started out with just 10 kids.
How long ago did that start?
Oh my God, at least 10 years.
Yeah.
Maybe no. Well, I was at. Yeah, longer than that, because it was right after graduate school. I'd say 2011, 2012. Yeah.
Okay. Right after I graduated.
Right. So yeah. So we it's great. I love that program. I love meeting the kids, and now it's really a well-oiled machine. Students use that for interviews when they're going to apply to colleges. They use that interview as a win, and.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's just it's so many famous artists, musicians, writers, singers. They're they didn't go to necessarily get a 4-year degree. I mean, Barbra Streisand doesn't have a 4-year degree, and I'm not saying sometimes it's just there, the talent, and I still find students are getting a lot of pressure from parents to become have that be their side gig, but still, I just think it's really important to encouraging people with the arts,
Yeah, somebody who's kind of starting out in the field of writing for either film or theater, do you have any advice that you would give them?
Well, it's really, really, really hard. You deal with the rejection all the time. You have to be comfortable with the unknown, right? So if you you just, as my mentor who passed away a couple years ago said to me, you do it because you cannot do anything else. Not doing it would make you very unhappy. And that's what I've learned, especially the last, I really upped my game as far as writing more often lately, because it really helped me get through the pandemic and everything. But, you have to really, really want to do it. And it takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a toll on relationships. I mean, women in particular were never, all the famous novelists that were women until I don't know, maybe 60, 70 years ago, were never married because, it took so much time. And, and it's the other day I spent all day working on this application for this really cool writing program / retreat. And I'm like, okay, well, if I had been with, if I had a spouse or something, they'd be like, let's go to the farmer's market today. I'm like, no, I'm spending all day applying for this, and so you have to be really dedicated. But another thing you have to do is to understand that you don't have to win an Oscar or an Emmy or make $300,000 selling a screenplay and still do art. I mean, that's what I love. I've had great opportunities up here to get my friends who are all in the film and television business, a lot of them have sold scripts and had never seen their work done. And that's why I like theater, because it's so intimate and it's so much less expensive. You can get some of your work done.
Yeah. And sometimes locally you're
right.
not even able.
So you have to find your avenues locally, and they're not. It's everywhere. It's not just LA or New York. And then you have to become. You have to learn how to produce. You have to learn how to network. These are things that writers don't like to do.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't tell anybody to do it, but I wouldn't discourage anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend of mine who was a writer who was really pretty famous and really, really smart. And she had a meltdown last week, like a writer's meltdown. And she was calling me, and then like she's like, and I'm like, yeah. She's like, and I'm like, I just feel like everything's like nothing's happening. The book's not getting done. I got horrible notes. Everything's a disaster. And I'm like, okay, first of all, it's not a disaster. You're like this award-winning writer, and I'm like, that's part of it. It's like,
yeah. It's just part of the process.
yeah.
Yeah.
Some days you're gonna feel like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But.
And honestly, most people feel like that anyways, no matter what they're doing.
Yeah,
you might as well do something you love.
And like I said, like, if you can find a day gig that, you can deal with, that isn't too stressful, that you don't take home with you. And like I said, I mean, it's just, people are like, well, when I retire, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, well, I don't have to ever worry about that because I'll be writing until like, I can't breathe.
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people think about is a lot of times when somebody retires, they don't know
Right.
what to do. So I guess the joke used to be like, you take up gardening or something like that. But to have art in your back pocket, you'll always have it there.
I'm not good at anything else. Like I'm a horrible homeowner. I can't cook. I can't garden. I'm not very good at decorating. I mean, it's, if I had my way, I'd have like a self-contained like writer studio, like with, I don't know, but I'm not,
ready to eat food that's just there.
I'm just not, it's just always been it's just such a huge part of my life. Like, I don't, I enjoy doing other stuff, but I'm just saying it's just always been who I am. And I'm really grateful though, because I never have to worry about what I'm going to do. Or, like I said, I'm in a really good period right now,
Awesome.
which is great because, 30 years ago, I was still writing, and I didn't know that I'd still be writing, now.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. If you're okay with it, I think that's probably a good place to leave it.
Sure.
Awesome. So thank you so much for doing this today.